Welcome back to Kindness True Stories. We often walk past stories every day. In the hurried commute, the quick lunch in the park, the fleeting glance at a stranger. But sometimes if we pause, if we truly see, we witness a narrative that reminds us of the profound, invisible threads that connect us all. This is one such story. It didn't happen in a grand castle or on a windswept moor. It unfolded right here in the heart of the everyday, in a modest neighborhood park in Chicago. It's a story about the architecture of loneliness, the unexpected blueprints of friendship, and how a family can be built not from blood, but from moments of simple, courageous kindness. If this tale resonates with you, please give this video a like. If you believe in sharing stories that matter, please pass it along. And to journey with us into more such heartfelt narratives, subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Now let's settle in. Our story begins with a girl, a bench, and the slow, turning pages of an endless afternoon. In the leafy, unassuming embrace of Sheridan Park on Chicago's north side, autumn was performing its annual alchemy. Green leaves blushed into hues of burnt orange and crimson gold, and the air carried the crisp, clean scent of impending change. But for 12-year-old Emma, the season was just another backdrop to a constant, unvarying scene, her own solitude. Perched on her familiar, weathered oak bench, the one with the faint, carved initials of forgotten lovers, she existed in a bubble of quiet observation. Her world was defined by the boundaries of her prosthetic leg, a sophisticated piece of carbon fiber and engineering that replaced what an aggressive bout of osteosarcoma had taken 4 years prior. It was her reality, her burden, and her shield. To the swirling life of the park, the joggers with their rhythmic breaths, the dog walkers with their tangled leashes, the flocks of chattering teenagers, Emma was a fixture, part of the scenery. The girl with the robot leg, and they might have thought in passing before their minds and lives moved on. She felt their glances, the quick, polite smiles that didn't reach the eyes, the subtle shift in conversation as they passed. So she buried herself in galaxies. Her worn copy of Carl Sagan's Cosmos was a passport to universes where difference was celebrated, where being an outsider was a prerequisite for exploring the infinite. She traced the constellations with her finger on the page, then looked up at the Chicago sky, pale blue and streaked with clouds, dreaming of dark matter and distant stars. Her mother, Clara, a nurse who worked double shifts at Northwestern Memorial, had worry etched into the lines around her eyes. "Are you sure you don't want to join that after-school club, sweetie? The art one?" she'd ask every evening, her voice thick with fatigue and guilt. Emma would always offer the same small, brave smile. "It's okay, Mom, the park is quiet." I like the quiet. But the quiet was a heavy blanket. It was in the quiet that she heard the laughter of other kids, a sound that seemed to bounce off her invisible walls. It was in the quiet that the phantom pains in her missing limb sometimes flared, not just physical, but a deep, aching ghost of the life she thought she'd have, a life of running, of clumsy dance classes, of simply blending in. Across the park, a different kind of chaos reigned. It was a small, joyous, exhausting chaos named Jake. At 5 years old, Jake was a compact engine of perpetual motion and wonder. His world was a series of urgent investigations, the strategic path of a ladybug, the aerodynamics of a dandelion puff, the profound mystery of why his peanut butter sandwich always stuck to the roof of his mouth. Chasing him, a testament to pure, devoted endurance, was his father, Ryan. Ryan's life was a meticulously organized, perpetually teetering tower of responsibilities. A structural engineer, his days were filled with steel beam calculations and site visits to rising skyscrapers that dotted the Chicago skyline. But his most important project, the one that demanded every ounce of his focus and love, was the small boy with grass-stained knees. Jake's mother had left when he was just a baby, a departure that was a quiet, unresolved ache in both their hearts. Ryan's love was a fortress, but even fortresses get tired. His love was packed lunches shaped into awkward stars. It was patient explanations about where the sun went at night. It was soothing nightmares about giant squirrels. It was also a deep, unspoken loneliness, the kind that arrives in the silence after bedtime stories, when the apartment on Southport Avenue felt too big and too quiet all at once. Their afternoon park visits were a sacred ritual for burning off Jake's boundless energy and for Ryan to steal a moment to just breathe, to watch the sailboats on the distant glint of Lake Michigan and feel, for a second, like something other than a man trying to be two people. For weeks, their orbits and Emma's were parallel, synchronous but separate. Ryan would notice the girl on the bench, always reading, always alone. A pang of paternal concern would hit him. She's too young to look so old. He'd think, but the moment would be hijacked by Jake's cry of, "Dad!
Watch this!"
as he attempted a perilous climb up the slide. The connection, the collision of these three solitary universes seemed as unlikely as a meteor choosing a particular patch of grass to land upon. But the universe, as Emma well knew from her books, favors unlikely events. The catalyst was a soccer ball, a cheap, slightly deflated one that was Jake's most treasured possession. On a day when the wind was playful, it snatched the ball from Jake's grasp during a wild kick. It bounced, a wayward red planet escaping its orbit, rolling across the paved path, over a patch of crisp leaves, and coming to a definitive stop, resting against the leg of Emma's bench. Jake gave chase, a tiny astronaut in pursuit. He skidded to a halt, his eyes wide. He looked at the ball, then up at the person who had captured it. Ryan jogged up, ready to apologize. "Jake, buddy, you got to watch where you're—" He stopped. He saw the girl close her book slowly, her movements careful. He saw her look at Jake, not with irritation but with a guarded curiosity. And then he saw Jake's gaze. It wasn't on her face. It was locked onto her prosthetic leg, visible below her rolled-up jeans. Ryan's stomach clenched. He knew the spectrum of childhood reactions, the stares, the pointed questions, the cruel nicknames. He braced himself, ready to deflect, to apologize, to shield both this girl from pain and his son from accidentally causing it. Jake took a step closer, his head tilted. He pointed, his small finger unwavering. "Dad," he said, his voice a mix of awe and scientific inquiry. "Look, her leg is shiny, and it has buttons. Is she a superhero?" The question hung in the autumn air, so innocent, so devoid of the pity or discomfort Emma had grown to dread. It reframed her reality entirely, not as a lack, but as a potential source of power. Emma, who had prepared for flinches, for whispers, was completely disarmed. A sound escaped her, a genuine, unfiltered laugh that was surprised out of her. It made Ryan blink. "Not a superhero," she said, and her voice was clearer than she expected. "But it does have a clutch, and it's waterproof." Jake's imagination was now at full throttle. "Can it run super fast? Can you kick? Can you kick my ball with it, please?" "My dad kicks all weird." Ryan found his voice, a laugh mixing with his relief. "Hey, my kicks are strategic." He looked at Emma, offering a warm, open smile. "I'm Ryan, and this inquisitive tornado is—" "Jake, sorry about the interrogation." Emma looked from Jake's hopeful, earnest face to Ryan's kind, tired eyes. She saw no trace of the sterile sympathy she hated. She saw interest, normalcy, a challenge. She nudged the ball with her sneaker-clad foot. "This one's the original model. The kicking happens up here," she said, tapping her thigh. Then, with a deliberate swing of her prosthetic, she connected with the ball. It wasn't a powerful kick, but it was true, rolling back neatly to Jake's feet. To Jake, it might as well have been a goal scored in the World Cup final. His jaw dropped. "Whoa, that was so cool! Do it again! Do a power kick!" In that moment, on a bed of fallen leaves in Sheridan Park, a bridge was built. Not of steel or stone, but of pure, unadulterated wonder. And three lonely orbits began, for the first time, to slowly, irrevocably, pull into a shared gravitational field. The most beautiful structures aren't always the ones that scrape the sky. Sometimes they are the quiet, invisible ones built between hearts. In the days that followed that first encounter, the weathered oak bench in Sheridan Park ceased to be just a piece of furniture. It became a site of construction. The blueprint was unspoken, the materials simple, time, attention, and a shared willingness to be present. For Emma, the next afternoon was a landscape of anxiety. Would they come back? Had it been a fluke, a momentary distraction for the little boy? She almost didn't bring her book, a silent act of faith. And then she saw them, Jake, pulling Ryan's hand, his little legs pumping as he pointed excitedly. Emma, we brought cookies." Ryan held up a small paper bag from a local bakery, a shy, almost boyish grin on his face. "A bribe," he said, "to ensure we're not intruding on your reading time." That day, Emma didn't just kick the ball. She showed Jake the mechanics of it. She clicked the release button, demonstrating how the prosthetic detached from the silicone liner. She explained the hydraulics that allowed the knee to bend, making it sound less like a medical device and more like the inner workings of a rover destined for Mars. Jake listened, his brow furrowed in concentration, asking questions that were both absurd and brilliant. Does it sleep? Can it feel a mosquito? If you put a magnet on it, would you stick to the fridge? Ryan listened too, leaning against the back of the bench, his arms crossed. He learned that Emma's mind was a fierce, beautiful thing. She talked about the physics of a soccer kick, the composition of stars, the possibility of life on Europa. He saw the loneliness not as a void in her, but as a space that had been waiting, patiently, to be filled with the right kind of noise. He began packing extra snacks, a second juice box, a bag of goldfish crackers, an apple. He'd offer them with a casual, "Jake insisted," or "they were on sale." He was dissolving any potential charity into easy companionship. Emma, in turn, became Jake's unofficial big sister and tutor. She taught him card games with complicated self-invented rules. She helped him build sprawling, unstable Lego fortresses for his action figures, narrating epic sagas of invasion and heroism. She drew elaborate maps of imaginary lands on the back of Ryan's discarded work papers. Ryan's role evolved naturally. He was the fixer, tightening a loose screw on Emma's backpack strap, retrieving a stuck ball from a bush. He was the silent protector, his mere presence a deterrent to any lingering, curious stares from other park-goers. But most importantly, he was the anchor. He asked Emma about her mother, about school, listening with a focus that made her feel heard, not just heard to. One afternoon, a chill rain began to fall, painting the park in slick grays and greens. "Well, that's our cue," Ryan said, standing and zipping Jake's coat. Emma began to gather her things, the familiar pang of the evening's loneliness already setting in. "You guys heading north?" Ryan asked casually. "We're walking towards Southport. Could use an umbrella bearer if you're going our way." It was a lie. They were heading east, but it was a kind one. That shared walk in the drizzle, with Jake swinging between them, counting sidewalk cracks, felt monumental. It was the first time their fellowship extended beyond the borders of the park. They became a familiar trio, the regulars of Sheridan Park, the elderly couple who fed the pigeons, the yoga group on the lawn, the college students studying, began to smile at them, a nod to the tangible goodness they radiated. Emma's posture changed. The hunched shoulders straightened. The defensive fold of her arms relaxed. She laughed more, a real ringing sound that startled her sometimes. But the outside world, with its less forgiving rules, was still a looming presence. The test came on a blustery Saturday. Emma was helping Jake build a leaf castle when a group of boys from her school, led by a familiar figure named Mark, sauntered past. Mark, who had once called her peg leg in the hallway, stopped short, a smirk spreading across his face. "Well, look who's found her playmates. Babysitting now, Emma? Or is that your fan club?" The air grew cold. Jake looked up, sensing the shift in tone. Ryan slowly stood up from the bench. Emma felt the old shame rise like bile, a heat in her cheeks. She wanted to disappear into the pile of leaves. But then she felt Jake's small, sticky hand slip into hers. She saw Ryan take a half step forward, not aggressively but firmly, placing himself subtly between her and the boys. He didn't say a word. He just watched, his gaze steady and calm. That silent support was a pillar. Emma took a breath. She looked at Mark, not at his sneering face, but at a point just over his shoulder. "Actually," she said, her voice not trembling as she feared it would, We're conducting important geological research on leaf sediment. Jake here is the head excavator. It's pretty advanced stuff. You'd probably find it boring. Jake, picking up on her cue, puffed out his chest. I'm a cavator. It's science. Mark blinked, thrown by the lack of fear, by the absurdity of the retort, by the solid, quiet presence of the man watching him. He mumbled something and shuffled off with his friends. When they were gone, the strength seemed to drain from Emma's legs. She sat down heavily on the bench. Ryan sat beside her. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. It wasn't the confrontation that overwhelmed her. It was the victory. She hadn't won it alone. She had an army. A tiny, mighty two-person army. Jake climbed onto the bench and hugged her arm. He was a meanie. You were brave, Emma. Ryan put a hand on her shoulder. More than brave. That was classy. In that moment, the architecture of their little family was complete. It had load-bearing walls of respect, windows of understanding, and a foundation, laid brick by brick on a park bench, of unconditional, chosen loyalty. They had built a sanctuary, and Emma was no longer a visitor seeking shelter. She was home. Sanctuaries are vital. They give us a place to heal, to gather strength. But life, in its relentless forward march, always calls us back beyond its walls. It asks us to take the strength we've found in safety and test it in the wider world. For our trio, the call came in the form of a bright orange flyer, decorated with clumsy crayon drawings of trophies and balloons. It was Jake's kindergarten, fall family fun fair and sports day, to be held in the school gymnasium and playground. To Jake, it was the event of the season. To Ryan, it was a minefield of potential embarrassment. Three-legged race. He'd grown to Emma the day the flyer came home. Emma, I'm 6'2" and I trip over my own shadow. And a soccer shootout? The last time I kicked a ball, I think the Berlin Wall was still standing. He was joking, but the anxiety underneath was real. He wanted to be the perfect dad for Jake, to not let him down in front of his friends. Emma had laughed, but she'd also seen the shadow in his eyes. A few days later, as Jake practiced penalty shots against the bench leg with fierce concentration, an idea began to form in Emma's mind. It was audacious, terrifying. It meant stepping far outside the safe perimeter of the park, into a crowded, noisy space full of strangers, parents and keen-eyed children. It meant exposing herself not as Jake's cool friend from the park, but as the girl with the leg, in a context where she had no control. Her stomach churned at the thought. That night, in her small bedroom, the fear was a living thing. She stared at her prosthetic, leaning against her chair. It was just a tool, but in the imagined glare of the school gym lights, it felt like a billboard announcing her difference. The phantom pains flickered. But then she thought of Jake's face, so full of desperate hope to just play with his dad. She thought of Ryan's quiet, I don't want to let him down. They had built her a fortress of belonging. Couldn't she, for one afternoon, be their secret weapon? The morning of the fair was a crisp, perfect Chicago Saturday. The playground of Jake's school was a riot of noise and color. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, moved in chaotic, happy clusters. Ryan and Jake stood near the sidelines of the makeshift soccer pitch, looking to Emma's eyes from across the fence, like an island of two. Ryan's shoulders were tense. Jake was hopping from foot to foot, scanning the crowd. Emma took a deep breath that did nothing to calm her racing heart. She pushed through the gate. She walked across the blacktop, her gait, the slight, rhythmic click and swing, feeling magnified 1,000 times. She saw heads turn. She heard the dip in conversations. A few kids pointed. Her face burned. But she kept her eyes locked on Ryan and Jake. Jake saw her first. His face, which had been clouded with pre-competitive nervousness, exploded into pure solar joy. Emma, you came! Dad, look! Emma's here! He broke away from Ryan and barreled into her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Ryan's look of surprise melted into one of such profound understanding and gratitude that Emma's fears momentarily stalled. He walked over. You didn't have to, he said quietly, his voice thick. I know, she whispered back. But Team JRE needs a ringer, and I've been training with the head coach here. She nudged Jake. Ryan's smile was everything. He understood the cost. He respected it. Okay then, Ringer. Let's show these amateurs how it's done. They signed up for the family soccer shootout. As they waited in line, Emma was acutely aware of the surroundings. The being about strategy. You gotta kick it in the top corner, Emma. That's where the goalie isn't. When their turn came, the volunteer dad running the event looked momentarily confused. Is this a three-person team? Ryan spoke up, his voice friendly but firm, carrying across the small crowd. It is. The more the merrier, right? The man shrugged. Okay, 5 shots. Best score wins. Ryan went first. He focused, took a run-up, and sent the ball sailing. Wide right. He grinned sheepishly. Told you! Jake was next. He gave it a mighty, earnest kick that rolled slowly and was easily scooped up by the teenage goalie. Then it was Emma's turn. The world narrowed to the white penalty spot, the small pop-up goal, the ball. Her mouth was dry. Her prosthetic felt both foreign and intensely familiar. She wasn't just a girl taking a penalty. She was every stare she'd ever endured, every name she'd been called, every lonely afternoon on that bench. She was also every shared laugh, every juice box, every moment of feeling seen. She placed the ball. She thought of the mechanical knee bending and extending. In her living room, as she practiced, against a pillow, she thought of Jake's face, full of absolute faith. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Ryan and Jake, standing together off to the side. Ryan gave her a small, confident nod. Jake was miming a powerful kick, his face scrunched in effort. Emma took 3 steps back. The chattering around the field seemed to hush. She ran forward, her steps uneven but purposeful. She planted her prosthetic foot, swung her other leg through, and connected. The thump of contact was solid and sweet. The ball took flight, a perfect, rising arc that kissed the underside of the crossbar and bounced down into the net before spinning back out. A goal, a clean, undeniable, beautiful goal. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Jake shattered it. He screamed, a pure, piercing trumpet of triumph. She scored. That's my Emma. That's my team. He launched himself at her, almost knocking her over. Ryan was right behind him, whooping, lifting both of them into a spinning, laughing hug. The applause that followed wasn't polite or pitying. It was genuine, sparked by a great shot and the infectious joy of the little boy celebrating it. They didn't win the plastic trophy, but as they walked away, Jake swinging the participant ribbon like an Olympic gold medal, Emma knew something had shifted permanently inside her. She had carried the sanctuary with her. She had left the bench, and the world had not ended. In fact, it had gotten a little bigger, a little brighter. The bench would always be their place, but it was no longer a refuge from the world. It was now simply the headquarters from which they launched into it, together. The most profound changes are often the quietest. There is no fanfare when a wound finally closes, when a lonely space in the heart is filled, or when a family expands to include one more. In the weeks and months that followed the sports day, the change in Emma was as subtle and undeniable as the turning of the seasons in Sheridan Park. Winter came, draping their bench in a thick blanket of snow. Their meetings moved indoors, to the cozy chaos of Ryan's apartment on Southport, with its Lego-strewn floor and the constant smell of toast, and to Emma's quieter apartment, where Clara, exhausted but radiant, would finally get to meet the mythical Ryan and Jake, her daughter never stopped talking about. The first dinner was a nervous affair. Clara, seeing her daughter animated, talking a mile a minute and laughing freely, had tears in her eyes that she blamed on the onions. Ryan, in turn, saw the source of Emma's strength, the weary, loving woman who had carried the world alone for so long. A connection sparked between the adults, a mutual understanding forged in the fires of single parenthood, and a shared, fierce love for the children in the room. The trio had gently, naturally become a quartet. Clara would join them on weekends, and the park bench adventures evolved into city adventures. They became explorers of their own city. They braved the icy wind to see the Christmas lights on the magnificent mile. Jake perched on Ryan's shoulders, Emma pointing out architectural details to him. They spent rainy afternoons in the warm, dinosaur-scented halls of the Field Museum, with Emma acting as tour guide, explaining the cosmic calendar to an enthralled Jake. They shared deep dish pizza at a noisy, iconic joint in Lincoln Park, arguing over the merits of sausage versus spinach. Emma's prosthetic leg, once the central fact of her identity, became just a part of Emma. Jake would still ask fascinated questions, but now they were about how it handled snow, or if she could wear different colored shoes on it. It was normalized, integrated into the fabric of their unit, no more remarkable than Ryan's height or Jake's missing front tooth. One spring afternoon, back on their bench as the first buds appeared on the trees, Jake was struggling with a math worksheet, simple addition. He was frustrated, on the verge of tears. Emma took the paper. "Okay, head cavator, let's think differently. Imagine these numbers are stars." She drew little stars next to the numbers. "If you have 3 stars in this constellation and 5 stars in that one, how big is your galaxy?" Jake's frustration melted into focus. He counted the stars, his tongue poking out.
8! The galaxy has 8 stars!
Ryan watched, a lump in his throat. He saw not just a girl helping a boy with homework, but a future unfolding. He saw the teacher, the scientist, the fierce, compassionate woman Emma was becoming, nurtured in part by the simple act of being needed, of being a vital part of something. He made a decision. Later, when Jake was chasing pigeons, Ryan turned to Emma. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice casual but his eyes serious. "Jake's school, it's okay, but the one a few blocks over, Lincoln Elementary, has a killer advanced science program from 6th grade, and a robotics club." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Lincoln was her school, the one she would be attending next year for middle school. "It's a good school," she said carefully. "Yeah," Ryan said, looking out at the lake. "I was thinking of applying for a district transfer for him. For next year, it would be good for him to be around someone who makes science look like the coolest thing in the world. If that's okay with you, of course. Might be embarrassing for a middle schooler to have a kindergartner trailing her." Emma looked at him. She saw the unspoken truth. It wasn't just for Jake, it was for all of them. It was a commitment, a promise etched in the mundane details of school districts and morning routines. It was family. "He wouldn't trail me," she said, her voice thick. "He'd be my research assistant." Ryan smiled, a smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. "Deal." The story doesn't have a dramatic ending, because this story isn't about an ending. It's about a beginning that keeps beginning every day. Emma still goes to the park. Sometimes she sits on the bench and reads. But more often than not, the bench is occupied by someone else. An old man feeding squirrels. A teenager on their phone, and that's okay, because Emma's world is no longer confined to that square of wood. And Diane, her world is now the walk to school with Jake chattering beside her, explaining his latest theory about where the sidewalk cracks come from. It's Sunday dinners at Ryan's apartment, where Clara's laugh fills the rooms. It's Ryan helping her with her physics homework and her helping Jake with his reading. They built a bridge on a bench in Sheridan Park, a bridge across the wide gaps of loneliness, of difference, of loss. And they didn't just cross it once. They settled on it, built a home there, and invited others in. The richest people in the world aren't the ones with the most money. They are the ones, like a single dad named Ryan, who have the courage to see a lonely girl not for what she lacks, but for who she is. They are the ones like a little boy named Jake, whose innocent wonder can reframe the world. They are the ones, like a girl named Emma, who find the courage to accept a hand, and then, in turn, become someone else's strength. This is the true kindness, the kind that builds, that endures, that expands to include. It's the story of how 3 lonely hearts found their missing pieces in the most unexpected place, and in doing so, created a whole that was infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. If this story of found family and quiet courage touched your heart, please let us know by giving this video a like. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that connection is always possible, often just a park bench away. For more true stories that explore the profound beauty of everyday kindness, subscribe to Kindness True Stories and hit the bell icon so you never miss a tale. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most universe-altering events aren't supernovas, but the simple, brave decision to say hello.